Welcome to episode 6 of the series on Introduction to Programming. In this video, we're going to cover logical operators. Logical operators are useful for getting programs to combine different conditions. Previously, we looked at if statements, and so one of the ways that we can expand upon that is to start combining different conditions so that we can make more decisions that involve something beyond just a single piece of information. And so without further ado, let's go into this. So last time we had a simple case where we had Boolean values in our variables. And beforehand, we had done if x, right out, hello. So I say hi a lot, but that's fine. So you run this code, and of course, because x is true, this if statement evaluates to true, and therefore we will print out the hello line. One of the things that we can do is we can say if x is true and this is kind of what and looks like in JavaScript, is it's the two ampersand symbols, and y is true, then we will execute those. So of course, this is a conditional operator or logical operator. And so what this allows us to do is say if we have two values, we want to make sure that both of these values are true. And if they are true, that means this whole statement becomes true. We'll execute what is inside of this block here. So again, if I run this, it'll say hello. If either one of these is false, so let's just change x to false, for example, and I run it, it will display nothing, because when it comes into here, it'll say, is this true or false? Well, it's false. And, well, it doesn't care, because the second you have an and one of the values is false, the whole thing becomes false. So what happens is it looks at x, it's false, skips over the rest of it, and it will just simply continue on skipping this block of code. Actually, I'll put a line here just to make it a little bit clearer that we're actually spitting out something. All right, so if I run this, all I'm going to see is world. If we do the opposite, where I set this to true, and I set this to false, and we run it, it will still just display world. And the reason is it'll start evaluating this statement here. X is true, so it'll say, yep, all right. And then it'll say, and Y, but Y is false. So if Y is false, then, well, what happens here is the whole thing becomes false. And again, we'll skip this line and simply hit world. So that's one of the operators. And again, if I have both of these as false, well, no part of this is true. So this time it hits one of these values and it's false. It then says, oh, it's false. The whole thing becomes false, and it'll skip whatever is between these two braces here. So again, if I run this one, it'll just display world. Now, that is useful. Say, for example, I want to make sure that, let's just rename this to users. And we'll say we have 3 users, and I want users to be greater than 3. And let's just say online, right? I only care if I am currently online. So if I have more than 3 users and I'm online, then I will print out hello. Otherwise, just print out world. Obviously, 3 is not greater than 3. So if I increase this to 4 and I run it, it'll still not display anything, right? Because even though this condition is true, the online part is false. So if we go online, we have more than 4 users, and we run it, we actually say hello world. And so this is what you usually will use these operators for is, you have something in a certain case that you want to perform an action, but you also want to make sure that it hits a other case, such as being online when you want to display this message, right? Say you want to say, what is my internet speed, right? Well, if I'm not online, it's kind of meaningless for me to show my internet speed. But so when I'm offline, there is no internet speed, right? We don't display it. An additional and equivalent way that you can do this and I didn't really talk about this in the previous video, so is you can nest your if statements, right? So if I come into here and I do this, those are equivalent, right? Using an and, but also just nesting it inside of the other one is basically the same thing, right? If I go back online and I run it, it'll display, hey, internet speed world. So that's kind of your and that is one of the first operators we will talk about today. The other operator we can talk about is the or operator. And so the two vertical pipes, those are representing the or operator. And so or means once I hit a condition that is true, I will execute the code block following it. Right? So even if I set online to false and I go and run this, it's going to spit out internet speed world because this part is true. Once any part of this statement is true, it will run the whole thing. Right? Even if I do something ridiculous here, like, right, how is users greater than 3 and less than 2? Doesn't matter because all it cares about is the first condition is true, it'll execute it. Right? Even if I set this to true and I say, well, make this clear and say my users is 0, I run it, it'll still display internet speed world because this part of the entire expression here is true, right? So the or operator means that as long as you have one of these conditions matching, evaluate the code within this block. So between the two of them, you can combine and ors. If I put this in here, this statement will become false because, as I said, with an and, the first time it encounters something false, the whole thing becomes false. And we evaluate things from left to right. And that's why this one here, because this one here doesn't run, is because the first part is false. And so the and basically skips the remaining conditions because it is determined that it is false. So the entire statement becomes false. We could change this, for example, is we can put brackets around this guy. And in this situation, this guy evaluates to false, and this one is also false, so we'll do it. But if I say set it to 3, then we'll actually see the whole thing display. And the reason why is because even though this section is false, this last part is not false. If I go and do this and I run it, I did it wrong. All right. So one of the things to note is even though this whole side evaluates to false, it will still evaluate the remaining parts of the expression. It does come across a true statement, so it writes out the whole thing. And this is why using brackets can actually be very helpful, because if I put brackets around, say, this, and I run it, this will not display because the and is performed prior to or performed after this or section of our code. So one of the things I would strongly recommend, don't have too many conditional operators on a statement, otherwise it starts to get complicated. We like to keep it simple. There is an additional operator that we haven't talked about called the not operator. So if online, right, we can do this where we just say we are online, right? Great. We can say that we are online. However, say we wanted to display something in the event that we were offline, for example. One of the ways we can do this is we can introduce the not operator. And this operator basically says, whatever value you have here, flip the Boolean value of it. Online is false, we flip it, it becomes true, and so this entire thing will become true. And you can see where we would use this. If you have a value that basically is, say, you have something to represent what is an online status for your application, but you want to do something when you don't have an online status, you can put the not operator in front of it to flip the condition around and make it true so that you can evaluate an if statement when this value is false. So these are the basic Boolean operators that we can make use of. We make use of them usually within if statements, and that helps us drive the decisions that programs make. It allows us to combine multiple pieces of information to make decisions. And so we can use this to add in more complicated logic into our programs. So have a good day.